everyone. Welcome back to this episode of Deep Dive. It's me, Crispina, with Steve.
Hello.
Okay, Steve, I know you mentioned this a few times before.
Okay.
That you struggled a little bit in the education system.
Wow, it's so nice. Struggled. Yeah, I was challenged by the education system. I wasn't the poster boy for what our education system was like. I spent more years than normal, went to the normal stream, repeated my first year in JC. So I have more friends in a way because I spend more time in school.
I wouldn't say I struggled, but I wasn't at any of the top lists or whatever. I was middle,
Okay.
straight B/C, those kinds.
Yeah, that's pretty good.
That's pretty good, right? Okay,
Yeah.
but I didn't do very well in my PSLE, so I ended up in a neighborhood school.
Okay.
And I must tell you that actually I loved it there.
Hmm.
Because suddenly I was allowed to do it at my own pace, learn at my own pace.
Okay.
And I made a lot of friends who are friends till today as well.
Yeah.
Did your experience affect the way you approached your kids?
Oh, for sure. I mean, I knew, knowing how the system works, they have to be geared up to a certain extent. I'm guilty of having them gone for all the tuition when they were in primary school.
Were
trying to
you
get the
gunning
grades.
for the top school,
No,
branded school?
In a way, yeah. I gotta admit, I was. Yeah, I wanted them to be in a familiar environment in the sense that because I had kind of been from that background too, so I
Okay.
wanted them to be in a similar environment.
Even though you felt like it was stressful?
All the more so because I realized that having the friends from your school were more important to a certain extent than the grades, at least from my point of view.
In yet more evidence that we are so different, I took the opposite route. I decided, you know what? I was not going to gun for the top school.
Okay.
I sure wasn't going to volunteer or buy a house near one of these schools. My kids went to neighborhood schools pretty
Yeah.
much.
And look at you now. You're my boss. At least for this podcast, right? So
My kids lah, hello. I mean, they are grown up now. They are young adults. The first one just started work and he seems to be doing okay.
So that's kind of what we're looking at. Education is such an integral part of all our lives and our kids. But does it evolve to match up with the changes in society? And now we're talking about there have been changes to the GEP program here in Singapore. Quite a big revamp to a certain extent. So we want to find out more as to what does this mean? What does this signal? And how does this really change things for our kids?
So we want to start by asking you, I mean, you guys both have kids. So when your children, whether it's nieces, nephews, friends, when they take this P3 exam, was there any pressure, to make it to the GEP program because it's such a, well sought after program in Singapore?
No, for my kids, I think they don't even want to go for the program.
What, really?
So they didn't take the GEP exam to test to see whether they would get in the program?
I can't even remember whether they did it or not. I left it to them. I said, if you want to go for the test, you go for the test. If you don't want to go for the test, you don't go for the test.
You're such a chill parent. Can I believe you?
People listening to this will be like, sure
Yeah,
not.
But I share a similar experience. My
Yeah.
elder daughter also went through the test, and I didn't even realize the first round had been completed until she told me she had to go for the second round.
Okay.
After the second round, she told me that she will only go to the school nearest the home, without which she's happy to stay in school.
Okay.
I think that's what most kids do, And that's one of the reasons for us to tweak the program. When we were growing up, we all like to have friends. We like to have what we call a stable environment for us to develop social-emotionally, not just to learn stuff from in the schools, right? Some of them might qualify and decide that I'd rather not change schools because I have friends. And so in the new program where you're able to do the program in the school, right, you have the best of both worlds. You can go for after-school program and mix with some other people from other schools, but essentially you are growing up in the same environment, and that's much less disruptive and much more inclusive for people who don't want to change schools to be able to access the program.
Just to say a quick recap of what everyone's talking about, the GEP will be revamped to cater to more students, right? 10% of every cohort, every primary school will have its own program to stretch these high ability learners. And more importantly, as you said, they won't have to leave and go to another school anymore.
Let me clarify that.
Yes,
It is
yeah.
10% of high ability learners, up from 7% today. The number of gifted students in every cohort is about 1 or less than 1%.
Actually, yeah. So I remember my kids going for this thing called HAL.
High ability,
learners, right?
Yeah.
And then there's some E2K, or which is
That's
for
right.
science or whatever. all this I only found out much later because,
Yeah.
I wasn't really, involved. And so they are regular kids who show an aptitude for, let's say, math or science. But these are not the same kids as the GEP kids, right?
That's right.
Which means, will their programs be different?
Slightly different. I think over the years we have gathered some experience running all these high ability learners program. And I think there are two things that we should always bear in mind. First is that talent or giftedness or high abilities come in different dimensions. It doesn't mean that someone is good at something, he's good at everything.
Of course.
Right. I used to jokingly say that some people are good at many things, but most of us are just good at some things. But it's okay. We just need to be very good at the some things that we do well. Now, so in the past, if you are chosen for the gifted program, you have to be generally good at many
Everything.
things. Maybe not everything, but at least
Many
many
things.
things, right?
Yeah.
But you cannot fail mother tongue lah.
Yeah. But that, you see, that adds pressure to the child.
Yes.
On one hand, you have general high abilities learners. But on the other hand, you might have people who are perhaps very good in math, science, in domain areas, but not everything. And these people will lose out on the opportunity to hone their talent in those areas. So this is the first very significant and fundamental shift in our philosophy of how we develop talent. We call it moving away from teaching to the average, of teaching to the average of someone else's ability. And the second thing I think that we have learned from our many years of experience is that talent, they don't manifest all at the same time,
Yep.
right? Some people are early
Late
bloomers,
bloomers,
some
right?
people
Yeah.
are late bloomers, but we don't want people to feel that you only have one chance to enter the program, and once you enter the program, you made it for life. That's also not correct. Instead, we want a porous system whereby you can come into the program at different points of your life, depending on your maturity and your readiness for it. And we talk about maturity, we don't just mean the maturity from a content knowledge, math and science, but the maturity must also encompass your social emotional maturity to be able to handle the program.
Well, so that's actually a lot of things. But essentially, so the kid good in math and science can just go and do a bit more in that area, but he may not be good in literature, for instance.
Yes.
So at least he's not forced to be good at all the subjects at the same time. And this is the new approach, right? So part of the challenge is in the past, we were saying there were only 9 schools who had this GEP program. Now you're saying all schools. Do they have the resources to support that?
Okay, in the past, they changed schools and we concentrated them in these 9 schools.
That's right.
Now, as we speak, we already have high ability learners programs across all our 180 primary schools. So this will continue. Now, in future, all these high ability learners program will continue in our primary schools, and we have many years of experience running this. Then for the after school programs, we will gather the students in the same geographical area and have them have the extra lessons in some schools. So these schools will be different from the current 9 schools.
Okay.
These schools will be chosen based on the geographical spread of the students.
And definitely more than 9.
Looking at the number of towns we have, chances are that will be more than 9.
Okay, but we can't run away from the fact that people's perceptions will be this, right? Like if I have a kid who is in Punggol Primary, let's say, and makes it to the gifted program, and then I have a kid, who is in RGPS or ACS, is my kid in Punggol going to have a very different experience? I mean, I feel like that's what parents at the back of their minds think about.
If I could take this more from a student-centric point of view, today's system, they have to clear a test as primary 3.
Yes.
Whether or not they're ready, whether or not they have manifested their strengths, they have to clear that bar in order to make it into the GEP. And so that is the limitation, first and foremost, that students don't show that strength immediately at one point and at P3.
Yes.
We're trying to change the system to broaden access to allow for students who show different strengths at different points. And when they are ready, we want to give them the opportunity. And then the second point about the provisions in terms of the development, actually it doesn't matter which primary school they are in, because we have built up over the years the HAL provisions across all our primary schools. So I can confidently say we have teachers trained in supporting the high ability learners in all primary schools.
So does this also mean that the kid can come into the program, let's say an HAL program at primary 4 instead?
Yes,
it doesn't have
absolutely.
to be at
Yes.
one time in
Yeah.
primary
That's
3,
right.
right?
Or primary 5,
Yes,
or even primary 5, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
right? Okay.
But there's one other aspect that we want people to understand. You see, in the past, if you are chosen and then you switch school,
Yeah.
then you are there forever.
Yes.
Then there are also cases of what if they found the program not suitable.
Mm-hmm.
Then, but because you have this GEP branding, right?
Hello.
Then you feel that, cannot fail, right? But actually, the new program is much more fluid, much more porous.
Okay.
So supposing I'm a P3, I'm very excited about this program because it's not that it helps me to prepare better for my PSLE, but it helps me to be exposed to other
Yes.
Yeah.
dimensions of learning that I'm not exposed to in my conventional syllabus. But what if in P4, from math, I decided that, maybe actually I can't really do this, but I'm really interested in science. And can I go on to that? Can I leave the math program without the stigma? Yes, you can. Right? Or you might in P4 say that, this year I may want to participate in some sports and I just want to leave the program for a while and I come back to it subsequently. You can still do that.
Okay.
Right? So you don't have this thing whereby there's
You're not locked in.
you're not locked in with one entry point and then one exit point, and somewhere in between you have no way out.
Yeah.
Yeah, but parents, I think they are the ones who decide these things.
They are the ones who lock it in.
We didn't say this, you all say
Yeah,
this.
yeah.
No, okay. I don't know whether you know there's GEP prep programs. Like people actually make a lot of money from
There's prep
this.
for everything. There's primary 1 prep as well.
Kindergarten prep. Also.
Yeah, I mean, it's
anyway,
crazy. Yeah.
But these guys are going to make even more money.
Okay, that's where I think recently both Assembly, Prime Minister Wong, and we ourselves have said this. We all can make structural changes, policy changes, but all these structural and policy changes must be coupled with a mindset change.
Okay.
And what is the most important mindset change that we must have as educators, as parents? First is that all of our children, they are all gifted in different ways. They all have their different strengths and abilities. And our job is really to help them find out their strengths and weaknesses and use their strengths and weaknesses with confidence to make a contribution to the world. But if our mindset is always having to compare our child with someone else, where our success is always defined relative to someone else, then this is going to be a very sad world. Because every day we'll wake up and say that, why is my child not as good as someone else in this? And why is my child not as good as someone else in another field? And we will feel rather miserable. And the child will also lose confidence in themselves.
Sure.
I think the term in the industry is called hot housing.
Yes.
More often than not, we actually do the child great damage in their learning journey. It kills the joy of learning. And then after a while, they can't keep pace because that's not their natural rate of
development rate, right?
Yeah.
I remember when the kids were young, my friend was like, look, my son who's only like 5 years old can read already. I'm like, great, because now that when they're both teenagers, they read exactly the same. So, I mean, great you had a head start, but that's our attitude. I mean, and so much of this is because parents feel like they need to be at the top.
In real life, when your kid is 7 years old, that's when you're choosing your primary school, right?
Yeah.
Sometimes you don't know what that kid is good at.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So if I
how?
could say something to assure parents, in the new modality, we're looking beyond tests. Today, it is really based on the results of the P3 selection, right? But we recognize there's no perfect instrument. There's no perfect test that can distinguish those who have been hothoused versus those who have the raw talent. Instead, we're moving away from quantitative testing to look at qualitative ways of looking at whether a child deserves that
Spot.
development.
Okay.
So, for example, there are some things you can see in a precocious learner. That curiosity, that creativity, the reasoning skills, and they show it in different domains in a different way. And that's what we are preparing our teachers to do, to recognize in the classroom. The boy who looks disruptive actually has a very inquisitive mind.
right.
Yeah.
Can we give a bit more to that child?
Right, right.
Then we have to ask one test that everyone talks about, that 4-letter one, PSLE. People are saying, if that's the case, if we want to have this sort of a learning experience, then why do we still have this one big exam, which basically tests a 12-year-old kid one day for that one paper, and his next few years of his life is determined by that one exam? I mean, is this something that we would consider relooking at?
Well, we always do this thought experiment, and this related also to how we teach and how people get selected into P1. Supposing we do without a PSLE, then what does it mean, right? If the mindset doesn't change, that we all still want to chase after a certain few schools,
Yes.
then that pressure will just be transferred from Sec 1 or P6 to P1. Because if it's supposing it's a 10-year experience, right?
Right.
Then in P1, you'll be even worse.
Ooh, a 7-year-old.
It's pretty bad already.
You can't
getting
have
into primary school.
you can't have a preschool leaving exam, right?
Yeah. No, so I agree. we
Which is
need-
what would have happened. If
What's the real purpose of the exam? The real purpose of the exam is not so much to sort people out into different schools per se. The real purpose of any exam is to help our learners to be in a suitable environment for their next lap of their learning journey. Now, supposing this, you just now using our example.
Yeah.
Supposing you know your kid is on average a good kid, but he's not exceptionally talented one way or the other.
Yeah.
Do you think that he's going to score an aggregate of 10?
Okay.
And suddenly, he comes home and say, Papa, my PSLE, I've got 4.
Okay.
I've scored 4 total.
Ah.
Question. Now, what will you do? Will you send him to school where he's around the aggregate? Right?
Basically,
Yeah,
will you send
yeah.
him to RI?
Ah,
Steve?
yes.
Will you send him to
answer?
another school?
Okay.
and
Or will you
aggregate
send him
is
to somewhere where, generally his ability is around the 9, 10, 11 range? You know your child. For the last 6 years, you know his aptitude, you know his abilities.
yeah.
You know that he's generally around 10. And he comes home and says, I have a 4.
Yeah.
Now, Steve, what would your choice be?
So you know he's generally around 10, is it? So
Yeah.
I mean, I'll probably still send at least a 7, 8 kind of environment,
Well, that's above his level, right?
above his
still
current
above
4.
his
That's
level.
right. But because you think the potential is there, right? And because we always think better of our kids.
You know,
then,
if
right?
I were to be
Okay, well,
honest, if I had a
Crispina,
chance for
yeah.
my kid to
Yeah.
go to RI, that kid is going to RI, right?
Ah.
even though he may suffer while being there because
We'll
he's
see if
all
he
the pressure,
suffers.
right? Yeah.
But it's a very
Hey
interesting...
boy, you either suffer in school or you suffer at home from me.
Okay, but Minister,
okay,
you tell me,
but-
what would you like? Would you?
I would say this. What is the correct answer really depends on your child. If your child is really someone who strives, someone who is a fighter, that even if he's at the bottom of the class, he will make his
Yep.
way up.
Yeah.
Then by all means send him to the aggregate score of 4 to 6 school.
Sure.
And he will try.
Yeah.
Okay. But what if your child is not that
You
character?
know him, right?
Yeah, you know him. What if he's not that character?
Yeah.
And he's just comfortable, like what both of you mentioned earlier.
Yes.
Working with people around the same ability group, and he's comfortable at AL 10
Yep.
Right.
kind of schools. Why not send him there? Or maybe your child is a bit more laid back and is the type that doesn't like stress, and he likes to take time out to pursue other areas with other people. So even going to a school with a AL 12 or 13 may not do injustice to his other forms of talent.
Okay.
So actually, the answer depends on
Yeah.
the child's
Right.
abilities and interests. Where does your child want to go? Because
See, we always
you
forget to ask the children.
you see, sometimes we always try to make decisions for
Yeah.
our
Our
children.
child. Yeah,
but
yeah.
sometimes we forget that actually they are the ones who have to take ownership of their decision.
True,
Right,
the other ones
right.
are going
But of course, today we are in a different age. Nowadays, we will always worry whether our child at that age can make those
Whether
decisions.
they're mature enough.
I don't know whether your parents help you to figure out which secondary school.
Yeah.
You seem to shake your head, right?
Absolutely not. My parents were not that involved. Were your
Okay.
parents involved? I think.
Oh, because I went to normal stream, so they were very stressed by it. Yeah, definitely. It was not normal for them.
But you see, actually,
Yeah.
I remember my mother told me this. Said, son, we are a family of limited means.
Okay.
Okay.
Be practical. Go to somewhere nearby, easy to get to. Don't waste too much time.
Okay.
Don't waste too much money on the bus. All of us didn't turn out too badly. Whether you went to normal stream, you went to
Yeah,
express stream,
yeah.
or whatever stream, it
Yeah.
doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Because life is not a sprint of the first 15 years. It is more important for us to enable our children to succeed in the next 50
in the
years.
long
Okay,
run,
so
yeah.
I still have to come back. Then why do we give them this big exam? I believe we need an instrument like the PSLE to measure some ability, but why not instead of one big exam, it could be 50% on the final exam, 50% over group work, graded over
so
time. Things
two
like
answers to that. So the first question is why one exam? Actually, there's no perfect way to do this because
Yep.
different people will have different kind of stress.
Correct.
Some people just
Will
want to
just
do
be-
one and get it over with. Some people say that you give me 4 exams and I will slowly accumulate. But some people will tell you that 4 exams will stress me 4 times more, right? So there's no answer. But that's another very important reason why we have to do some of this, what we call right sighting of the
Yep.
children in the secondary school. Now, imagine at primary school, they all come with different abilities. We literally have within a class the gifted, high ability learners, all the way to some children with very high needs, maybe special needs.
Right.
And from a teaching perspective, I think the professionals will share with you.
That's
It's
challenging.
actually very challenging to teach a class like that. So when we select people to go into different schools, different classes, actually is to have a care for the teachers, how they teach. And if you look at the philosophy of what we have done recently, from the higher mother tongue changes to the full subject-based banding and to the GEP or the higher ability learners, we are actually allowing learners of the general same abilities to come together, also allow the teaching to be much more targeted and focused. Because if you go into a class, 20, 30, 40 students, and if you have to cater to the average ability of the class, then you can't be very focused in your teaching.
Yeah.
Right? Either 50% will find it too difficult,
for sure.
50% will find it too
easy.
And you are
Be
nowhere.
bored and distracted.
Yeah. I just wanted to talk, press in a little bit more about the teachers, because I have a lot of teacher friends.
Yeah, she used to be a teacher too.
I used to teach in a poly, not secondary school. So I totally understand. I used to crack my head on how to get to the brightest kids and the not so bright kids and the middle not paying attention to me anyway. So now when you have these different clusters, right, it's easier to teach. But my friends tell me, my teacher friends tell me, it doesn't mean that the workload is less. So for them, it's an issue of, okay, this is like direct quote, I cannot make 24 hours, 48 hours, and I'm worried about the manpower, and change is tough. You've been a teacher before.
Yes.
When the minister says, okay, time to do this new thing now, then you're thinking, oh my God. how
No
am I
teachers
gonna
thinking,
manage?
oh my gosh, another thing we have to do.
Yeah. Well, the way I will look at it is that we're not expecting every teacher to cater to that great diversity of students in the classroom. What we need to do is to do differentiation a little bit better at the school level.
So even teachers have differentiated strengths and
Focus
will,
areas.
yes. And,
so you look at the direct impact of it at the secondary level with full subject-based banding. The form class could have students with different abilities in different subjects.
Yes.
But when it comes to the subject lessons, they break into their bands.
Right.
Those who are stronger will offer G3 mathematics, and those who need a bit more support at G1. So then you can have different class sizes depending on how many students you have at each level. So a G1 class could be as small as 5, 10 students, and the G3 could be a full 40 across a few classes. The same will happen at the primary school level when we look at in-school, in-class differentiation for the high ability learners versus those with additional needs.
Okay. High ability and also gifted, right?
Absolutely.
So maybe you might have a really talented teacher. I'm sure you've had experience with yourself, your kids, where the GEP teacher has different skills.
Well, we differentiate the abilities of the students.
Yeah.
We also want our teachers to be able to be much more targeted, much more focused. And that goes to the workload. Like from your experience, trying to cater to the entire range of abilities in a class in 1 hour is quite mission impossible. Yes. But if we are able to differentiate the students' needs and then match them with the teachers' abilities, actually overall is much better for our teachers and much better for our learners. Now, having said this, I don't want to minimize or downplay the challenges that our teachers will have. Because in order to do these mass customizations, we need to make sure that the logistics and the support is correct, and that we are committed to making sure that our teachers get the necessary timetabling support, logistic support. But over time, we also need a certain mindset shift. That instead of just providing our students with everything and allowing them to perform or excel, we also need to make sure that we allow our children to grow and at their own pace. Sometimes when I look at the type of things that we provide in our schools and in our families, maybe sometimes I'm just wondering whether we have provided too much, and that it allows them to perform, but it doesn't allow them to.
They don't need to think on their own
and how to do it.
Oh, they don't have fun.
That's the whole spoon
No,
feeding.
they don't.
I mean,
They are so busy. Like an average 12-year-old is busier than a regular adult.
But it's not about MOE doing more or less. It's about how we do it differently. Actually, in many of our schools, especially the very challenging ones, I think we must have a care and not pigeonhole our students in certain ways.
Fair
Because
enough.
some of those, perhaps what we call the naughty students, when given a sense of, given a chance for responsibility to be demonstrated in certain positions, you might be pleasantly surprised that how they go forth, take care of their fellow friends, and then at the same time demonstrate their leadership potential. So I think that's one thing that of how we do things. The other thing is that actually we can learn some things from the latest technology. For example, this thing called adaptive learning. What is adaptive learning? You know, we do a math. Today I say, okay, this is the math questions. You all go back and do the homework. But actually there's very little feedback. Today we already have technology learning from the world of games whereby you play according to your level. So if you are very good, I can stretch you a bit more.
Sure.
Okay.
And if you're not so good, actually, I can repeat the process and allow you to try again. And that allows us to customize our learning.
Okay.
And more so, I'm not saying that we are there, I'm saying that more and more so, we are moving towards that way to equip our teachers with this type of technologies to be able to fine-tune the support and the teaching for the students.
Right. So you need to pay teachers more then.
Yeah, actually, would
Because
this whole
now-
system,
Thank you for your support. Thank you for your
Yeah,
support.
would it work
Please
better?
help us to make the case for the public to support
Because you're
our
asking
teachers.
them
Thank
to
you
do
for your
tech
support.
and,
No,
like all
teachers
these
should be paid more, for
differentiated...
sure. Yeah.
Yes,
Sure,
They're doing
right.
so
you.
much more.
We have two supporters here. Thank
Yeah.
you. Thank you
Yes.
very much.
Yes,
But I mean,
please.
in the ecosystem of this, all these changes that we want, actually, it will be beneficial to have more teachers, right? Overall, everyone will benefit more if there were more teachers in the system.
I think we will try to get as many teachers as we can without compromising the quality.
Yes, of
But
course.
we are also realistic that in any society, to get that quality band of teachers is not easy. I've spoken with my counterparts everywhere else, and they all are not as privileged as us to be able to recruit the top 1/3 or to recruit from the top
Okay.
1/3 as we have. But actually, they also share something which we also personally feel that's very close to our heart. Beyond all this thing about the workload, beyond all this thing about the pay, the work environment,
Yes.
the most important determining factor as to whether they can get quality teachers and we can get quality teachers is beyond the factors that we've mentioned.
What is the biggest quality?
You've been a teacher. What do you think will be the biggest factor that affects our ability to recruit quality teachers?
Well, asking me question
No,
instead.
no.
It was a very intrinsic thing. Teaching is more intrinsic than
Okay.
extrinsic.
Okay, so Steve, what would be
If
your,
I were a teacher,
your,
I guess
your
it's
pick?
is the fact that you're doing it to shape these young lives, lah, and
So
later on
intrinsic
to-
again, right?
Yeah, yeah. It's
So-
not, yeah.
No, but you also had to have a leader to allow you to experiment, to give
So
you
the
support
school must
when
be
you
supportive
needed
of the
it.
teachers.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Actually, the survey done by the OECD is the respect for the teachers at the societal level. When the society no longer respect the teachers, when teachers are bullied, harassed, and whatnot.
Do we have a problem with that?
I'm not saying here now. I'm saying
But,
that
yeah.
you see some other countries whereby people don't want to join the teaching profession because of all these other
They get
factors.
harassed by the parents.
I was a principal of a school once. I think what is very important is that mutual respect and trust. Parents trusting teachers to do their job well.
Yes.
And
Yeah,
they do
yeah.
this with the best interests of their children at heart.
Yeah.
And then the teachers also trusting parents, knowing that, okay, when they come
Yeah.
with a request and ask questions, they're also concerned about the children. How do we bring them together as partners?
Going back to the point of this partnership with the parents is so important in the next step forward is because the demands on our children will continue to
Of
increase.
course, yeah.
And we must have this partnership
Yeah.
because no matter what we do in school, it's about 8 hours, 10 hours max, right? But what the child spends outside school, the kind of environment that they are exposed to,
Yep.
whether is it the social emotional development or any other thing, we need to be in close partnership, which is why MOE will be working with our parent support groups,
Yeah.
campus group, to come up with a set of positive guidelines on how that relationship can
Yeah.
evolve so that we can better support our children.
Right.
Yeah, parents are indeed a big part of all of this. I think we understand our ecosystem here. Very often, our kids end up the way they are because of the environment they're in. If you are being stressed by your parents all the time, what choice do you have as a 10-year-old
The
kid?
parent
right?
is stressing the kid and the teacher.
Everyone.
We want to have a very simple but powerful message to all our students. Every one of you are important in your own ways. We are prepared to support you with the best. And we just want you to develop at your own pace. And in time to come, you pay it forward and give something to the next generation.
So at the end of the day, I think the infrastructure is there and the changes are in the right direction. To make it really work, I think parents, well, to a large extent, we just need to chill a bit more. I really like.
That's a hard
don't-
ask. That's also not his job, lah.
Do not
So-
take time off for your kid's PSLE. You are not taking the exam. Your kid is, and you stay home and stress him. Have you done that worksheet? Do you?
Okay,
It's even
please
worse.
send all the hate comments
Yeah,
that way,
tell-
not to me. As a parent, right? Do you feel like it's quite important to just follow what you think your kids might excel in rather than what you want them to?
That's how I always have conversations with my kids. It's not what I want them to do. It's what do they want to do.
Yeah.
Right? Because I know at the end of the day, the most important lesson they picked up in life is not the skill set, nor the subject matter that is at hand. The most important thing I want them to pick up is the sense of ownership. the sense of responsibility for my future. And I always encourage them to say that, even your dad may not be the cleverest one around, but it is discipline and determination that will help you to overcome life's challenges. And you might think that I come from top school and so forth, but I'm nowhere near the top of my school. And in fact, even during my early part of my career,
but your CV is so glittering compared to ours.
I must tell you this. Even during the early part of my career, someone encouraged me by saying this: Chun Sing, don't worry. You are never completely useless. Minimally, you can be a negative example.
Okay, so you see...
Well, Minister, you are cleverer than most of us.
For
your kids
sure,
can be
you
assured.
are the cleverest of this table. Okay, Kong Kong, maybe,
Okay.
your experience. I know you told me that, you didn't go to a GEP class, etc.
That's right.
Right? But
Yeah.
your daughter did.
That's right. I came from an ordinary school in primary school and secondary school. And it was in primary school that my science teacher noticed I was that curious, inquisitive child. So no GP, not in the GP, but she sent me exploring. So in those days, I have to catch butterflies, catch tadpoles, and
Yes.
record data. And that's why I became a science teacher eventually.
Oh.
So that teacher helped me to become a teacher. And in JC, it was a teacher who also told me, why do you want to study in Singapore? You may have the opportunity to go overseas. Why don't you try?
Right.
And that's why I got a scholarship eventually to study overseas. So it's because of teachers like that who notice every child, who give them opportunities to grow when they are ready for it. That's why our children can blossom. So on this, with Teachers' Day coming, I want to really thank all our teachers and for all the hard work they do.
Definitely, we all have. I have teachers that I specifically remember. They form that memory of your school.
Yep.
Not so much about the stuff I learned in school, but yeah. So teachers are so important in our journey.
Yeah, but I really want to thank both of you because of your strong support for our teachers, and I'm sure our teachers...
I'm biased, Minister.
Yes, you are still part of us.
I'm very
but,
biased.
but this is very important.
Admittedly so.
This is very important because when a society no longer respect their teachers, when a society no longer pay attention to teachers, I think from the conversation, we all want the best for our teachers so that they can do their best for our children.
Yeah,
and that is a
anyway,
philosophy that I think we must hold dear, and not like in other countries where people harass the teachers until nobody wants to be a teacher. I
Right,
think
right.
that would be very negative.
I don't think we're anywhere there yet, right? I mean, I think most parents are very respectful. And after all, teachers are the ones who build the leaders, right?
Thanks so much for listening. If you have any thoughts on what you've heard, feel free to drop us a comment. We're on YouTube and, of course, on all the usual places you get your good podcasts. A shout out to the team: Tiffany Ang, Joanne Cha, Junaini Johari, To Yan Yun, and Saya Win. Sound mixing by Ken Delbridge, and our video editor is Hanida Amin. That's it for now. We'll see you next week.